Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Deborah Eckerling, creator of the Deb Method for Goal Setting Simplified. I am also the author of Your Goal Guide and 52 Secrets for Goal Setting and Goal Getting, how to stay focused, grow your network, and get more done in less time. Yes, there is a goal theme, and yes, this is Goal Chat. I believe you can't reach your goals on your own. You need your people. So every week I bring together some of my people to dive into the topic. And today we're going to be very meta because it's a podcast and we're going to be talking about podcasting. You might be watching us as Goal Chat Live or the replay or listening to us as Goal Chat on the Marketing Podcast Network. No matter how you found us, we are so glad you're here and excited about at least one of our favorite topics, right? Okay, guys, nod. We have Eric Fisher and Jürgen Strauss with me today, both longtime podcasters and, of course, podcast guests, because when you're out in the world, don't you want to be on both sides of the questions? I'm going to say yes. Eric, let's start with you. Please introduce yourself and why you love podcasting so much.
Yeah. Okay. So first off, I'm Eric Fisher from Beyond the To-Do List, a show I've been doing since August of 2012. So 13 years this coming August. Yeah. So 12 and a half years old. My show is almost a teenager, and it's a show about productivity. I've had conversations with a lot of the big name hitters in the productivity field, a lot of great authors, Cal Newport, Michael Hyatt, John Acuff, all those different. Deborah Eckerling. Yes, all the greats. So that one's actually recent. So as of like a few weeks ago, even. So, but
right.
Yes.
Great I'm show. Sorry, I had to say it. I just could not resist. Well, and you and I have known each other from our days at Social Media Examiner, working in the social media marketing world. And one of the benefits, I think, of the fact that everybody is on tech these days is we have stayed in touch, which is whenever I want to catch up with my friends, I just invite them on the show. And both of you are kind enough. Eric's already interviewed me. We've got it on the books for you to interview me next month. But this is how we roll, right? The podcast is more than just a way to get information out. It's a way to hang out.
Yes, exactly. So, and that's one of the things, and so to finish the conversation or the answer, one of the things that I love about podcasting is not just getting to talk to people that you normally wouldn't get to talk to, but also being able to connect with them and have people that, you meet at a conference, you walk up to them and they say, and stick their hand out and say, Eric, nice to see you in person, or a hug. And and that's happened with people that I didn't think would even remember me. Like they were on my show once and then I see them at a conference and they're like, hey. So that's just, it's great to start and build and continue and keep and maintain relationships, but it's also that informational piece too. I love being able to, I think I probably listened to 2 in the car alone today as I was driving and dropping and picking up people. So I love them.
Awesome. You're good. I'm assuming you love podcasting as well because you are here.
I do. Yeah.
But please share a little bit more about that and who you are and why you are here. I think you're here because of Jess. Jess introduced us, right?
That's right. She introduced us. So yes, Jürgen Strauss from the InnovaBuzz podcast. My business is InnovaBiz, and we were a marketing agency that helped our dream clients build their professional credibility through sharing content, through creating content and sharing their information and their wisdom online, and then how to reach and connect at a human level with their dream clients. So that's always, to me, been about connecting with their dream clients at a human level. And the podcasting space kind of became the focus of that. Now, I'm a relative newbie to podcasting compared to Eric and possibly Deb. I started podcasting in 2016 of August, so not quite 10 years yet. The things I love about podcasting, and again, I've had some fabulous guests on. So Eric dropped some names, and as I'm a relative newbie, I still have Deb and Eric to come on the podcast yet. However, I have had Michael E. Gerber on my podcast in several years ago in the early days, and that highlighted to me the ability to actually reach people who are on top of their game, who are very in demand, who probably charge thousands and thousands of dollars for a 30-minute consult with them, that if you have a podcast, you can invite them on the podcast, and generally they will come on the podcast and they will share a consultation with you if you ask the right questions. And then the beauty of that, so the learning aspect that Eric mentioned is one of the things I love about it. The other side of that coin, of course, is I get to share that knowledge, that wisdom that I've just learned with my audience. So it's kind of a win-win-win, if you like. I've also had Mike Michalowicz on the show a couple of times. I've had Mark Schaefer on the show a couple of times. Recently, Mark was on the show, and that's about to be published in a couple of weeks' time, I think, to talk about his new book, Audacious, which I happen to have lying here. And that's another great thing I love about it. People who are talking about the books they're about to launch will often say, send me your personal address and I'll send you a copy of the book. So you get free books and you get to delve deeper into the book. And because I've already had the conversation, the book is so much more meaningful because I'm triggered things that I read back to the conversation that I've had.
It's a really good point of that. And as I mentioned before, so 52 Secrets for Goal Setting and Goal Getting came out the end of January, now an ebook, also audiobook coming soon. But what I love is it was really an outgrowth of this podcast, because the podcast was the outgrowth of your goal guide. So I had an earlier version called Guided Goals, which was out 2015, 2016. And then I hit the pause button. And when your goal guide came out in January 2020, and then the world shut down in March, my publisher was like, hey, have you ever thought about doing a live show? And I had. So that started as an interview show, which developed into a panel show, which led to a book, bringing together secrets from a bunch of different people. There will be more books, so guys, don't worry. There will be outreach to you for that as well. But the whole purpose of it is to gather information at a glance so people can go to what they need. So beyond just talking to people and sharing information and getting to meet people that you ordinarily would not have access to, there are so many benefits to having a podcast. Did I miss any, Eric or Jürgen? Benefits?
Well, I think Eric touched on it in his answer, and that's the community aspect, being able to reach out to people at any time because they're part of your community that they've been on your podcast, so they remember who you are, and particularly if you've done a good job in making their experience on your podcast be awesome, then they'll certainly remember you. And I think building a community around podcast guests is one thing that I also love. I'm naturally an introvert. I tend to get energy from going inside, and I like to do things on my own. And I find it very difficult in networking events, public networking events, to actually make new contacts. When I started podcasting first, I thought, I love this. And not only that, I find it really easy to grow my network through the podcast. So I think that's a big benefit.
Eric, anything to add?
Yeah, I would agree with everything that he just agreed that I already said. I think that it's one of those things where we just don't realize that it's one of the things that I haven't heard it said recently. Let's put it this way. There's been a lot of talk of, and we're doing video right now. People will listen to this later. People will watch it later. The live aspect is great as well. But one of the things that I haven't heard a lot of talk about recently, with all the talk about podcasting moving much more into video than, or having a resurgence, because there was a lot of video podcasts back in the day. I watched a lot of them. I watched more of them then than I do now. I don't have time to sit and watch stuff. I watch other things. I occasionally will watch a podcast on YouTube, but it's got to be a specific one or a specific topic or whatever. I love the portability of it, but I also love having the voices in my head that are different from the regular voices in my head. And I think that lends itself to the, for lack of a better word, I think the best word probably is intimate. It's close. You feel like there is a film review show that I listen to every single week, have since about 2017, and it's those three guys, and that is the show I look forward to the most every week. Like, it's the one that as soon as it comes out, that's the one I'm listening to. And they don't know me, although I have met one of them in person at a conference and all of that, but like, it's that intimacy, it's that connection that you can have as a listener with the host. Even if they don't know you, you feel like you know them.
Isn't that so cool, though, when you meet people or when people come up to you, then it's been like, I know your show.
Early days, you'd be walking around at a conference, social media marketing world or podcast movement, and you would be talking in the hallway with somebody, and I would have it happen too, to me, and me having it where I would hear other people talking in the hallway, and you don't really, I mean, you don't think a lot about what the people look like. You're used to just hearing them. And they stop you and say, "Are you Eric Fisher? Oh my gosh, I listened to you do that." And I didn't do it like that to other people, but I would say, "Hey, I love your show. I listen," and I would go up to them because I'd hear their voice first down the hallway, and then, go up to them and talk. And
I've been in a social situation a couple of times over the last year, which was totally a different world to the podcasting and my business, and met two new people. So 2 occasions where I met a new person who came up to me and said, "I know you." And I thought, I don't recall having met before. And I listened to your podcast. I love your show.
I want to real quick address what Eric was talking about with video, because yes, we are talking heads. You can easily, and every now and then someone will like throw a book for show and tell or bring a prop or whatever, but we are very listenable. The reason I do mine on video is just because it's easy. And for this one in particular, we go live to Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube every Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific. And then Thursdays, these are released as the audio versions to Marketing Podcast Network. And there's a blog post, there are embeds, there's shareability, but it makes it really easy when what you do is a live show and then it's out in the world. And then the other aspect of it is, if you're recording audio, you might as well have the video bits as well. So that's where that mentality comes from. The other show I do is Taste Buds with Deb, and that's a pre-record, but I pre-record it and then also release it via StreamYard just because it's easy to get out in the world. These are one-on-ones. They're about 20 minutes, and then they're uploaded to all of the places and out in the world on Wednesdays. So I think at least for me, because I do so many different things, and podcasting is talking is one of the things that I love, but you have to be really cognizant of your time. So this is what I do, because then I get to podcast more, and it's very time and user friendly for me. So for you, Eric and Jurgen, what do you do to make podcasting easy so you get to do it more? Or what are user-friendly aspects that other people can learn from for their shows? Eric?
Yeah. Well, so to go back, I want to tie what you said into what I was talking about earlier. There's this emphasis on, and a lot of podcasters, I think, feel, due to all the emphasis on, you must do video. No, you don't. You don't have to. You don't have to. You can. You should figure out how to, maybe, but you don't have to. And for me, like, I'm fine on camera. I'm comfortable on camera. However, I don't always have the luxury. Deb, you've got the great setup of consistency, same day of the week, same time of the day. You're going live. You've got a new panel of people every week, weekly, and that makes sense. I can't really do that because I've got to fit my recordings in at an interval, a strange interval. Like I've got 3 or 4 this week, and then I've got 1 or 2 next week. And then, and it's all these different, it'd be so sporadic and weird. I don't want to go live every single time randomly all over the place. That's fine. But I will still record the video just so that I have that to splice into clips and things moving forward. But to make it easy,
wait. Before you jump in, I want to respond on this one. That's how I do my taste buds. Is I will batch them. I still record on this platform. I still release it on this platform. But when I started this show, I was leading a Sunday night Twitter chat, which I led for a bunch of years, 5.5, I think. And so it made sense. I had a Sunday night Twitter chat to do a Monday live show, and the timing just worked. I also know not everybody can do that. So yes, I am unique and very fortunate that the beginning of the week is a great time to motivate people. Well, any time is. Now, please continue.
Yes. So what I would say is to lean in first. If you want to make something easy, if you're wanting to do video, the easy thing to do would be to do it live and to get a co-host. So you're not doing it by yourself, or to have a panel like you do. Something along the lines of where it's not all on you, and the threshold is low because you're not like recording it and then having to figure out, then turning it around and putting it out and everything. It's already out. It's out as you do it. So there you go. The other easy thing that you can do to make it easy is not do video. If you don't want to do video, don't do video. Make it easy. Just record privately at your leisure with your guests. Make yourself available for certain intervals. Set up a Calendly, or TidyCal's another great one. There's a bunch more. Make your predetermined blocks of time on your calendar that you're available, accessible to your potential guests, and give them the link once you've vetted them and said yes, and let them pick and choose. And then it pre-populates onto your calendar. And then you're not having to back and forth like tennis, pickleball, whatever. Figure out through email, okay, well, when are we going to do this? Okay, well, when I'm available from here to here, I'm available from here to here. Let's Venn diagram those times. No, just you've already predetermined. Give them the link. So
it's almost like you host a productivity podcast, Eric.
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay, you're good. You have to follow that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Eric just described something that I've been doing since the beginning, and that there are a lot of tips like that actually, and I'm sure Eric knows more than I do. I'll come back to the video aspect. When I first started my podcast back in 2016, I did video and audio, mainly because everybody said you should do video. And so I did video, and I didn't have as good a studio setup as I have today. So it was always a case of kind of rearranging the room and the lighting and everything to set up for the recording. And then in those days, I did a lot of editing. So I did probably 80% of the show turned out to be quite different in terms of the natural flow of the conversation to the final edited product. And of course, editing the video to that level was a huge amount of work. So at some point, I noticed the statistics of people watching the video and thought, no, it's not worth it. So I stopped doing video for many years and recently resumed doing video. And the reason I kind of went back into video is it's a lot easier these days. It's a lot easier to record video and audio. And then you can use the video if you decide to use it, or you can not use it. But it's no more work to record the video, and I found it actually very good in terms of this conversation here, to actually see the people, see their faces, see their reaction, and also to see when they were going to pause. If I'd ask a question and the person would talk, I could tell, okay, they're pausing to think now, so I should give them space to think, or they've finished. I can tell by the look on they've finished saying what they wanted to say, so now I can jump back into the conversation. So I found that very helpful. I now do very little editing on either the audio or the video portion, because I'm very confident that unless the guest is not as articulate as perhaps I would like, and usually I've vetted people to the extent that I know I can rely on that. I like to do the conversation naturally. So in the old days, I would edit out all my ums and ahs. I would edit out the guest's ums and ahs and say, well, I'd like to present them in their best light. So if they hesitated on an answer, I would edit that out and make it sound really professional. These days, my philosophy is different. It's somebody's listening into a conversation, and that's how the conversation went. And unless the guest says to me, oh, I don't like how I said that, can I say that again? I would then edit that piece out. Otherwise, it will go live. So the video is pretty easy then. I simply do a little bit of cleanup in terms of the technical quality, and there's tools that you can do that very simply, and then upload it to YouTube. Because first of all, YouTube is the second biggest search engine on the internet currently. And secondly, Google Podcasts is now in YouTube. So to be on the Google's podcast algorithm, you have to be in YouTube in some way or form.
And doesn't YouTube now allow you to do podcasts that aren't necessarily video?
Yes, you can upload. I think you have to put a thumbnail or something in there, but you can upload audio.
Yes, because I know that both the Tastebuds and GoalChat are listed as podcasts in the YouTube world. So there are a lot of ways to get your podcast found, which we will get to in a second. But I am with you. You know, the video is, and this is when I started my first podcast, someone said, you're doing audio, you might as well have it be video too. Okay. And in the apartment I lived before where I am now, whenever I did a show, I did not have an office space in that apartment. I had to pile up a certain number of books to get the computer at the right height. So every time I recorded, I had to do the setup, so I would do a bunch at a time. It is much easier. And thank goodness, you know, I lived here at the beginning of the pandemic, because I would probably spend every day rebalancing the books, right, to make sure everything was at the right height. I think having a space where you can go to record, whether it's audio or video, is also very helpful, because you don't have to think about it. It's there and ready when you are. What other things in terms of setups can people do to make their life easier?
Well, I'm very strong on audio quality of podcasts. Eric mentioned before that as a listener to a podcast, it's kind of an intimate experience. The podcaster is in your ear. And I've listened to podcasts where there's been a lot of static or a lot of noise, or they've been very soft, so I've had to turn it right up. And when I get to the end of that podcast, the next thing audio that comes up screams at me and almost blasts my eardrums. So I feel that it's very important to have a really good audio quality, and there's a couple of ways to address that right from the start, and that's work in carpeted rooms. And I've heard of people actually going into walk-in wardrobes and doing their podcast in between all the clothes, because that dampens all the echoes. I've got a setup where I've got a carpeted floor, I've got curtains, I've got furniture, natural and various things. So there's not a lot of reflection and bouncing. And then I use some software to actually enhance the studio sound through AI. So we can talk about where to use AI in podcasting, even though we want to keep it human. But there are AI tools that can actually enhance the recorded audio later on. So I think that, to me, that is one of the things that people, when they start, should pay attention to. And it's pretty easy to do, even with a setup like you described earlier and similar to what I had earlier. So I went into my bedroom and just set up something on the table there. But the sound quality, because of the soft furnishings in the room, was still very good.
I would say one of the other things is definitely, if you can, invest in something like a Rodecaster or something that has, all the processing stuff that's built in. Like, so for example, having a good enough mic is one thing, but having it plugged into something that can make it to where if my dogs were barking elsewhere in the house, you couldn't hear it get picked up on the microphone at all. This is also very helpful when it comes. This would have been very helpful actually back in the day at an old house where you've got people doing weed eating or leaf blowing or etc. For those of us who live in areas where that is something that happens. I have actually that also comes into play with I've had a number of times recently where I've been hosting a show for a company, and the guest on the show has sirens in the big city. Just normal. Like, I don't think anything of it, but I also think to myself, oh, the editor's going to have to somehow maybe figure out pulling that out a little bit, and it's not there for the whole podcast, so it's just that section. So, but it could help with that because it would reduce the bleed of all the exterior sound into the overall recording. So, Deb, you were asking what other things we can think of to do when it comes to like having a dedicated space. I mean, that's definitely one of them. Maybe you can find like a WeWork or a place that if it's a co-working space of some sort, you can schedule and make sure that you have a specific room. Sometimes there's even these little pods. I had been, when I was working for a company in New York City, there were a couple times where I would get up and go and sit in these. I mean, it was like a phone booth, and I'd set my computer down and I'd have a virtual call with somebody who wasn't there in the office. Even though I was out of town in there, it was somebody that was virtual, and it was silent, and there was padding on the walls and all that kind of good stuff. And it would drive me nuts to use it all the time, but coming up with something like that, or even having a closet, if you had a walk-in closet with all the clothing around you that would absorb sound, that's also another option. There's lots of options, in other words, but having a dedicated space that you don't have to set up over and over. Because I went through that for a while with a place with a conference table, and I had to book it, and then I would keep my podcast gear locked in a locker there. And that was part of my rent for the month of my dues for the co-working space.
I'd like to add to that what Eric's just said. I don't know. I imagine it's similar in the US, particularly in the large cities, I would imagine. But certainly we're in a fairly small city here, and there are a couple of small podcasters that have a dedicated little studio, and it's essentially a little cubicle like Eric described, fully soundproof. They've got microphone, camera gear, everything set up. All you need to do there is go in, plug in your laptop and sign into whatever recording software you're using, and you can record the podcast straight away. And they're very thankful if you give them a little bit of a contribution for an hour in there. So that's another nice way to kind of start off, particularly if somebody isn't sure if podcasting's for me, and I don't want to necessarily invest a lot of money. The Rodecaster Pro is only about $120 or $130. It's not a huge investment, but if you do 5 episodes and then say, no, this is not for me, then it's kind of dead money. So a good way to start might be something like that as well.
There are also studios that do have the pods. So that is their thing. I mean, I don't know if they have them in smaller cities. I do know that when I was on a panel for Digital LA at a place called Bespoke LA, they have podcasting pods in their space. And that's what they're there for. So maybe do a little bit of a search in your area if you do not have a recording friendly home, or move the clothes and use the closet. Whatever I think works that's going to make it easy for you is what you need to do. That's I'm all about goal setting simplified. So find what you can do that's going to give you the least amount of, I guess the Yiddish word would be service, headache, and do more of that. And you had mentioned there are AI tools. What other sort of apps or things can podcasters utilize for the quality of their podcast to make it better?
Well, I use a tool called Descript, which is an editing tool that works. So it's quite unique, or it was quite unique. I imagine there's others now doing the same kind of thing. It takes the audio or video, does the transcription, and you can edit the transcription as you would a Word document, for example. And if I want to edit out an or an or if I want to edit out a whole sentence because I've repeated myself somewhere, I can edit that out as if it were a Word document, but it also cuts out that audio. It has a neat feature in that I can record my voice, so you have to train it, and it can then insert a word. It can correct words using my voice, which is very impressive. It has the tool I mentioned before to enhance the quality of the audio to give studio sound. It has all the traditional editing that you would find in other editing software that's been around for many years, in that you've got the different tracks that you can overlay and fade in, fade out, and those kind of things. So that's one I use. I also take that transcript from Descript, and I use a tool called Cast Magic, but I also do it from first principles in the large language model. So whether it's ChatGPT or Claude are the ones I tend to use the most. Is I have a whole lot of custom prompts that I put in there. I give it the transcript document, and then I ask it to give me a blog post outline. I do this by starting off analyzing the voice and the tone and the general feeling or mood of the episode. And I get that analysis back, and then I question it on that analysis. So it might come back and say, this is a very optimistic conversation about podcasting, or it might come back and it might say on some episodes, it said things like, this is talking about a very dark period in a person's life, but how they dealt with that and how they came out and improved their business or their life as a result. So I then have kind of a mood and a tone that I want to couch whatever I write about that episode in it. And then I have a bunch of questions I ask in order to give me a blog post outline. And then I take the outline and I write the blog post about that. And then I feed that back in and say, okay, help me improve this. And
isn't that cheating?
It's using tools to make my life easier.
Okay.
I look at it as, it's almost like having a conversation with somebody that's completely non-judgmental about a conversation I've just had with somebody else.
Okay, I could, as a freelance writer, I always get a little bit weirded out by people who are using it. I agree that AI is a tool and it is a good tool, but for me, I use Descript for when I do my taste buds with Deb, because they're supposed to be 20 minutes and I do end up on tangents that don't necessarily, some of them stay in, but not all of them. So Descript, I think, is really good for editing. And I don't even have a problem with transcripting, but I think you've made it, and no judgment at all, you've made it like an art form. How do I use this series of tools to get the message out so more people can learn from this podcast?
Yeah, well, what I was doing in the past was listening to the conversation, listening back, and then I had some notes. I would make notes during the conversation, which I found a little distracting. So now I don't take any notes. I just have this conversation, and I know that I can get a transcript later on. And so I focus completely on listening and being fully present in the moment. Whereas if I'm thinking, oh, that was a brilliant comment that Deb's just made, and I have to write it down, then I'm not fully present in that moment subsequently, because you're probably still making the next point, which might be equally fantastic. So that's been really helpful. And then I would listen back to the conversation and make extensive notes. And then I would listen back again and compare those notes. And I think, no, that's not really expressed all that well. So I bypass a lot of that process.
Definitely a time saver. Eric, do you have something to add either to this conversation or tools that you like?
Yeah. So Jurgen's already mentioned Descript and Cast Magic, two of my favorites. But ways that I've found, and I definitely love, and by the way, I'm going to give a shout out here. Friend of ours, Jeff C., showed me how to finally, you can pull in separate tracks. So my side of the conversation and the guest's side of the conversation as separate tracks, so I can apply studio sound to only their audio, because mine sounds good, theirs doesn't, but I don't need studio sound to mess with mine and make it start to sound a little digitized or swampy in different ways, and make it degrade the already great sound, or the already great sound that I already have as an NPR podcaster. No, so now that I know how to do that and can pull them both in and can just select that track and make that happen, that is a lifesaver. Some of the, what are they calling it? Overlord is what they're calling it. Overlord is, and I'm like, really? That's what we're calling this? Some of the Overlord options in Descript are amazing as well. They make it to where it can scan the whole document and find all the filler words. I don't think you should remove all the filler words, but sometimes it can give you you can jump to the points where they're the excessive ones, or it can even scan and you can kind of slider tool redundancy and rambling, and I've turned it on and then slid it all the way down, and it's occasionally given me oh yeah, they say that there and they want to suggest removing it, and they cover that here, and that makes sense. It's being a little overreaching. It's fine. It's whatever. But the cool thing is being able to import both sides of the conversation, do the studio sound on one, but then be able to already, even without editing, grab that transcript and then throw that into a predetermined, I'll go into just plain old Chat GPT, where I already have a chat set up where I've given it a previously fully worked version of how I like my show notes, and say, study this. Now I'm going to give you a transcript from a new show, create a new version of the show notes, but with that for that show. And it's 80% of the way ish. And I mean, it's mainly, this is the person, this is the, this is the guest. It's what they are. That's what they're known for. It gives a bullet list of the different, because I've taught it already. I've already taught it what I want. And so it spits back out something that's close. And then I can then take that and fine tune it. And it gets me, so much, because one of the things that's hard as a podcaster is okay, I've got to make show notes now. I've not only researched the guest and prepared for the guest and recorded with the guest and now have the recording. Now I have to put it out there, but I have to put I've got to edit and then make show notes. And show notes, it's like yet another thing I've got to cross off to get done, to cross the finish line of publishing. Having this as one of the things that I do. Then I also have a separate chat where, I've actually integrated into the same chat. I've kind of made it a checklist now. It's like, give me my version of the show notes. Again, I'm expecting about 80% done. And then give me like 20 SEO keyword rich possible titles. I never used any of them exact, but I see 2 or 3 and I kind of pick those and then merge them together and then craft it into my own version of a title. And then also like a 1-sentence summation of the episode as like the tagline that goes in the short summary when it shows up on social. And I can have it do all of that just by importing. Okay, now do this one. And that's all I do now. Like I've set it up and all I do is upload new transcript and then write, okay, now do it with this one, enter. And it does it. And I still have to do work, but it does so much of it, not for me, but through what I've already guided it to do, that then a lot of my then heavy lifting is out of the way and I can sit and finish and turn a show around fairly quickly.
That's pretty much the way I do it. I have a slightly different approach, but as Eric mentioned, teaching the AI what your expectations are is really important. And the other one that I do is I put out some audiograms on social media, and it used to take me forever to find a 1-minute snippet that I can turn into an audiogram that encapsulates the key message from the show. Now I get ChatGPT to do that. It still struggles a little because it tries to paraphrase the key message. And I haven't figured out the ideal prompt, but what I know I need to do now is go back. Is that the exact words that the guest said? And it will almost always come back and say, no, that wasn't exactly what they said. Here's word for word what they actually said. And then if I like that, because that's the quote, I will then say, what's the timestamp for that, so that I can easily find it in the Descript editing, so I don't have to go through and look for it. And then I can make the audiogram within Descript.
So what I figured out is that I needed to tell it those things, like, like I even front loaded. I say, please give me the timestamp and the exact wording of the guest saying something, and then profound. I don't know, and then it gives me, those to select, and I can click and see the timestamp as well as then click, and it takes me right to that place in the Descript transcript.
Okay, I feel like I have some playing to do with these tools. Well, and I do it, as you may have seen, I will put things in the chat. I don't do extensive show notes, but I will pull out different comments, and I will take that from the comments from the Facebook is what I will use for the recap. So it almost sounds like I could be integrating a little bit more AI. We will see. Again, my writer hat has a little bit of a problem with it. So my Taste Buds episodes go into actual articles in the paper along with recipes for each episode. So there's just so much that I am willing to manipulate because, again, I'm writing articles based on that. But for show notes, I can see the differentiation, and perhaps
I think the key is what Eric said, is that it gets you perhaps 80% of the way there. It does a lot of the heavy lifting, and then we, as the podcast host, then fine tune it to be the way we want it to be. The other thing is, of course, you're starting with a constraint which is the content that you've given it, which is the conversation you've just had on the podcast, plus the instructions that you give it.
I like to think that every single one of mine have that optimistic tone. So I appreciate you bringing that out before. What are some things, because a podcast, if you podcast and no one listens, it doesn't make a sound. What are some of your recommendations for spreading the word, either about your podcast specifically, or how do you share new episodes so you get them out and listened to, etc.? Promotion, yes. What are your recommendations for promoting your podcast and or individual episodes? See, sometimes I edit myself in the middle of a conversation.
Yeah.
There you go. Eric?
I think it starts with choosing. I mean, if you're a guest based or, podcast, choosing who you think will share it. That's not the first reason to pick a guest, but it is a reason to pick someone that's good. Because if they enjoy their time on the show, right, then they will share it. So you still pick them because of their quality and their speaking ability and their expertise. But you also want to make sure that when you put it out there, that they are notified. And again, you don't want to have the expectation of, oh man, they didn't share it. Make it easy for them to share it. Provide them the stuff for them to share it. You share it and tag them in it and make it so irresistible that they feel flattered and, and again, they remember the experience they had recording with you. That's one of the biggest ones. That did a lot of good. Back in the early social media days of, 09, 10, 11, 12, and even when I started my show in 2012, I'd get these guests and then I'd share them. And I'd even do a contest where I'd say, hey, I've got this person's book. I'm going to give away 5 copies. And so if you retweet this episode or this post, I will then randomly pick with a randomizer whichever comments it was or whichever retweets it was. So and so that always did pretty well early on in the day. That's just one possible option. There's many more, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think I agree with Eric on that. Is social media promotion is a big one. And I think one thing Eric said there was make it easy for the guest to share. So we share with the guest all the bits and pieces we put together for social media. So we have a bunch of tweets that we send out over time. We have a slideshow, a slide deck that we promote on a social media post. I mentioned the audiogram before. So we give all of that to our guest to make it really easy for them to share. We even write a post for them to share. So instead of my post that would go on saying, I just had a wonderful conversation with Deb Epperling and Eric Fisher on podcasting, and we got all excited about all the wonderful benefits of podcasting and so on, I would write it in the third person, and I would write it, for example, as if it were Eric on the show, and Eric would say, I've just been on this podcast with Jürgen Strauss and we had this conversation. So all I have to do is cut and paste if they like it. Of course, they're welcome to write their own, but I try to remove as many barriers as possible. The other thing that I'd add to what Eric said is when you tag guests and they kind of respond, because often the guest will then say, I had a great time on you, or it was a wonderful conversation or something. Respond to those comments. Respond to comments that listeners leave. Ask questions in social media, encouraging listeners to say, so I usually have posts that say, here's my 3 takeaways from this conversation. What do you do in this? Or what do you think is wonderful about podcasting, or as a podcast listener or podcast host, what are your thoughts? And so I invite comments in that way. And if you get those comments, then respond to those, carry on the conversation on social media. And that often leads to growing your network as well, because people will come in from the guest's network, perhaps that you didn't know, who might comment on that guest's post, and you can have a conversation with that person.
And you will both, and Eric knows this, who's been on the show before, you will both get an email from me tomorrow with the blog post and all the links to the replays and the LinkedIn posts. And then at the end of the week, when it goes up as a podcast, you will get that link as well. So that's in my whole process. And of course, the tagging does make it easier to share, but I do like the idea of encouraging people not just to be sharing your post, be commenting on your post, but giving them materials to share, because that the more barriers you take out of everyone's way, right, the more likely they are to do things, as it were.
And I also, in the thank you emails that I send out, I kind of ask them to share, but I do it in a way that emphasizes what's in it for them. So it's not, oh, please share, because it gives my show a lot more visibility. I say something like, sharing this episode, you shared a lot of valuable insights on this topic on our show, and I'm really appreciative, and I've learned a lot from that, and I'm sure my audience will learn a lot from your wisdom as well. Sharing this more widely will spread that wisdom to a bigger audience and will enhance both our visibility, something like that. I mean, that's sort of off the top of my head. I can't remember exactly how I word it, but I basically put it in the light of there's benefit to the guest sharing that episode as well as to me as the host.
I like it and I get it, but do they not know?
Well, some people don't share. So
so by putting it in there, it's just another.
It's just
what
a
is
little
the
nudge.
that there's a certain number of impressions you need to tell someone something for them to get it. In a way,
it's rather than, I mean, if I say, please do me a favor and share this episode on social media, it's almost like, yeah, I'll do it. I know it's a good thing to do. I'll do it later, but there's so many things I have to get to today, and then it's forgotten.
No one wants that. Eric, anything to add on the encouragement element?
Yeah, again, I think that if you can give them such an experience that they walk away from it feeling like, oh my gosh, can I, hey, I've even had people ask this. I'm not bragging on myself, but I've had this happen where it's like, I've even offered it. I've thought to offer it then. Hey, can I have that video from this podcast? I'd love to have that to cut up and even make clips myself. And I'm like, sure, why not? and offer, think to offer that. Offer them any and all everything. Like, they were a guest on your show. They're going to use that, obviously to promote themselves. But if they feel like you created such a great atmosphere for them to shine that well, that they want that, then why would they not share it? And hopefully, tag you in it. I mean, again, I would almost say caveat. Yeah, sure. Just let me know, like if, where, when you share it. I'd love you to, maybe give credit where credit's due. It's from my show, but that can be tricky. But with the right people and the right framing and the right dialogue, that can work.
I think, and this is, I believe, mentioned at the top, the whole point of podcasting is those win-win-win situations, right? Win for the host, win for the guest, win for everybody's audience, because we're here for a reason. We want to uplift, inspire, give actionable items so they can improve whatever it is that we are talking about. That is the entire point, right?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
crickets.
Yep.
No.
Absolutely.
What's wrong with feeling? No, this has been great, and I always love it when I learn new things. And I appreciate you both being on today. And this is the point in which I ask my guests to gift a goal to the audience. So what is one thing anyone could do today, tonight, tomorrow to improve their podcasting, whether as a host or a guest? I know not everybody is ready to jump into the hosting thing. Now, I personally, if all I did was podcast, I would be very happy. I feel Eric shares that with me. Maybe you do. Jurgen as well. So what goal do you want to gift today? Eric?
I'm going to give one to the podcast listener.
Ooh.
You
Okay.
have favorite shows. When was the last time you went and left a review and sent a feedback item to that host, producer, whatever, thanking them for their show? Because that means a lot to them. Go find their show, leave a review, and then also find their contact info, send them a message, and tell them thank you for their show, and maybe mention one that you liked and tell them why.
Oh, that's a nice one. I like that.
Yeah, I like that one.
Because we love fan mail. We
Yes.
love reviews even more. That's good. Okay, Jurgen, what goal do you want to gift?
Well, I'll give a bit of a corollary to that. And it's this, and it applies to podcast hosts and podcast guests. And it's this: after you've been on a show or after you've hosted a show, if you're a guest, ask the host, what could I have done better? If you're a host, ask the guest, how can I improve as a host? And then listen. So if they say you talk too much or you made it difficult for me to get to make an appointment or whatever it is that they tell you, don't justify why it was like that. Listen, maybe ask some questions in terms of, why did you find it so hard? How would it be easier for you? Or whatever it might be, digging in further. Because to me, I've done that in every show I've been on, and the things I've learned about myself and about the way I am as a guest or the way I am as a host have been just amazing. Now, you don't have to agree with everything that the feedback that you get. There are times when I think, oh, that's weird. There are times when the feedback is about something that I've done for a specific reason, and it hasn't shaken my belief in that that's the right thing to do for that particular reason. But there are a lot of times where I've thought, oh, I wasn't even aware that I was doing that.
Well, since we're only at 2 guests today, I don't want our listeners to feel like they missed out. So I am actually going to offer a goal, which I don't always do. I love yours, Jurgen, and I will certainly ask that question of both of you once we go off air. What I want to know is, if you are thinking about starting a podcast and can't quite get to it, make a list of what's stopping you and then read it and see if there are actual reasons, right? Because throughout this show, we've given a lot of feedback. If you really want to host a show, you can easily do something, anything to dip your toe in the water before jumping right in. So if something is stopping you, make a list, read it, and see if there are actual reasons. And then if you're already hosting a show, think about what is one thing you can do to make it just a little bit better. What's one more thing you want to incorporate to up-level, improve, bring your show to the next level. So there you go. And if you, and I've gotten this question, I'm trying to say 3 things at once. So what else is new? I was at a podcast-focused mixer for Lioness Magazine last week, and it was, I would say, of the group, maybe a third of us were podcasters, and maybe the other 2/3 were, they liked being guests. And I just feel like, and there were people like, what are the benefits to being a podcaster? I think there's so many. If you've got the time and the wherewithal to do a podcast, then it is certainly worth exploring. What do you guys think? What do you have to say to the person who wants to start a podcast, but they keep not?
Well, I think I like your idea of making a list in terms of what's stopping me, and then going through that list maybe the next day after having slept over and say, well, that's not really a good reason. And I don't have a studio. No, that's not really a good reason because I've just listened to this podcast that's got plenty of tips how I can overcome that. And then go ahead. I always say to people who are interested in podcasting as I say, well, why do you want a podcast? I kind of turn it around on them and challenge them because they've heard podcasting is a good medium and they want to get their message out into the world. So I say, well, why podcasting? And I ask them and I kind of challenge them and that get them to justify to me why podcasting. And then I say, well, okay, what's stopping you? And often it'll be I don't have the equipment, or I don't look good on camera, or I don't like the sound of my own voice, and those kind of things. And I say, well, you can overcome all of those self-doubt things. One way to get started with a very low-cost, easy approach is reach out to some podcasts you've listened to and you like that have guests on, and tell them what you can contribute to their show and go on as a guest. Do that a few times, see whether you like it. If you like that, then the next step is getting the equipment, getting the setup. And again, we've got tips today where you can kind of do that in a sequential way. You don't have to invest in anything. You can go and borrow a pod somewhere and start a podcast, see how you go, and then grow from there.
I like that. I think we're going to do a bonus goal is no matter where you are, hit yourself to a new podcast that you can just take a few minutes, find one you like, and just send a message. Easy as that. Eric, what is your message to people?
If somebody is, if they've wanted to start a podcast but haven't, I would say, again, I repeat what I said earlier. You don't have to do video. If you want to have decent enough audio, there are mics that are good enough. Or honestly, even just setting your phone down and recording it and doing some practices, talking to somebody face to face, or again, getting on Zoom and hitting record there. It's built in. You can tweak the sound with software tools later, some that you can find for free, or even do a trial of something and then try it that way. It's practicing in public. One of the things that people have done is create Facebook groups where nobody's in there but them and a few other trusted people, and they'll stream live into there so that then people can see it. And it's not the world, but it's a small little sliver of the world that are trusted friends that can give you the feedback, like we were also talking about earlier. And you can practice in public, but not on a big stage, but a smaller one.
Yes, that is the key. And you're talking all the time. So just turn on something to record you and see what happens.
Yeah.
Easy peasy.
So I've got a question for both of you as podcast hosts, because Deb, you mentioned pitch yourself to as a podcast guest. So what makes a good podcast pitch? Because this is something that is one of my bugbears.
Eric, do you want to answer first?
I can answer, actually. This is something that I know a lot of the do not do's about. And I don't mean from me, because I don't pitch myself to a lot of shows. I mean, I get a lot of pitches and they're bad ones. A lot of them don't.
Must be the same as I get.
Yeah, same ones. Yes, we'll go compare notes. I would say, number one, know the show. I see shows that don't have guests get pitches for guests and then share them, and I laugh with them. So know the show, know the topic, know the host, know what type of show they're running, know how you could be a guest that would provide value. Give them don't launch into I think I should be a guest because, and then have a wall of text that's a paragraph of all your accolades and your books, your speaking, your this, your that. He started serial entrepreneur is how so many of them start. And I'm like, well, this isn't really an entrepreneurial show. Sorry. It can be applied that way, but you're going at it the wrong way. Know the show, know the host as much as possible, show them that you could provide value, and give them suggested topics, and even, again, circle back to know the show, know how they would present it. Like, hey, this week we're talking with so-and-so. This week we're talking with Eric Fisher about how to discover your unique work style. And it would have to do with, all the different things that we try to put in place productivity wise that is against who we already naturally are with, early rising or staying up late or our temperament or all those kind of good things. I won't list it all off, but I could then come and say, hey, we could walk through this and so you've got to know the show and know the host, and don't brag on yourself, but aim to provide value and keep it short and sweet. And then I would say the other piece is, if you sent them that email and you didn't hear anything within about 48 hours, don't bump it up in their inbox. They are busy. I look at my stuff about every 3 to 4 days, and the ones that bump up, I'm like, I do a quick scan and I'm like, not a fit. And I'll delete you. Sorry. Just going to be blunt. Like, if you're going to try and grab my attention that quickly and not let me have time to really consider your offer that's already not really crafted that great, sorry. So be patient. Maybe give it a week or more. So those are just some random, there's a lot more do's and do nots, but you can tell this is a pet peeve of mine.
That's why I asked the question.
I got a message, and it wasn't a podcast pitch, but it was, I'm so sad you haven't responded to me, about somebody who LinkedIn connected with me, and we had mutual friends who I trusted, so I accepted them. And then I get three messages 3 days in a row, and each one is, I'm sad. I'm really sad. Don't you like me anymore? And I'm like, if I wasn't going to respond to a normal email, what makes you think I'm going to respond to that?
Don't make me regret connecting with you.
Yeah, exactly.
I've had that happen too.
Exactly. And I'm so glad you went first with that answer, because I'm going to go in a completely different direction with mine. I will just ask, especially with the new book out, I asked trusted friends, do you know any podcasts that I would be a good fit for? And it starts with an introduction. So that's the way that I look, because I would say, if I look at my career, and I've done a lot of different things, 90% of any bit of work I've gotten has been through an introduction, which is why networking is so important, which is why podcasting is probably one of my favorite forms of networking. It is a conversation opener. As a host, and I think I shared this with you, Jürgen, when we did our Let's Meet, is when I get pitches that say, I want to be on your show and I could talk about this, this, and this, and they give me a presentation, that is the example of someone who's never watched my show, because these are not presentations. These are not one-on-ones. These are conversations. When I do get a pitch from someone interesting, I will tell them I host a mixer once a month. It used to be just for podcast guests, but I opened it up, and I'm now doing my goal meetings once a month. I bring together my friends. Want to be friends? Come to one of my events. We could talk about your topics towards the end, and we'll see if we find a fit for you.
Yeah, I love that idea when you shared it with me, Deb.
And then we've got Marsha Medcomer, who hosts a radio show, who I've been on twice this year. Thank you, Marsha. And she says, unsolicited requests to guests to, wait, I should be wearing my reading glasses. Unsolicited requests to guests can be hilarious and wildly uncouth. Many are converted to block sender. Yes.
Yeah,
there you go.
That's brilliant.
And and then I'll let you finish. I feel like we can keep going. Just as when I have a good guest, you will see they are on my show over and over again. If I have some people, you will never see again. So you want to be a good guest, you want to get invited back, and you want to get the referrals. Okay, now go. You were saying, Jurgen?
Yeah, I've got some horror stories that kind of touch on some of the things that Eric mentioned about don't do. But I get heaps of pictures, and just yesterday I got about four of those emails. So just bumping this to the top of your list. And I've actually, since the beginning of the year, I haven't done any get to know you call. So my process is I do a get to know you call with somebody if I haven't met them before, if I haven't been introduced to them, and it's a 15-minute call, and then I decide, well, we both decide whether they qualify to be a guest on my show, and whether I decide whether they can add value and whether I get on with them, and they decide whether it's worth their time spending an hour with me to come on the show as well. I haven't responded to any of those since the beginning of the year because I'm thinking of implementing your suggestion of having this group get together for the people that cold pitch me. In terms of my process that I normally use and the process that I share with people that we work with is the first thing you do after you know who the podcaster is and what the podcast is about. And I also say, find out something about their audience. Little things like, what do they call their audience? Like a lot of podcasters have a name for their audience because it's their tribe. Using that name, using the podcaster's name when you go on the show is just little things you can do to be a really good guest. But before you get to that, you need to know that, and then start a conversation with that person. And that could be, if they're a podcaster, they're promoting their show on social media, just like we've talked about earlier. Go on, listen to one of their shows, find a post on social media where they've promoted that and say, hey, I listened to that show with Deb and the conversation about podcasting, and I found it fascinating, and here's what I really liked. Or you might even say, I've got a totally different view on how to approach this, which then starts a conversation. And once you've started a conversation, there's a relationship already. Now you can elevate that conversation to the point of saying, hey, I'd love to come on your show and share my experience, share my view, because as I said on the social media post, I've got a slightly different approach. Or you might say, I've been doing this for a long time and I've found the same sort of things, and I've got some really good ideas how to overcome the issues or how to enhance this further.
I am not at all surprised that our conversation on podcasting is almost at the hour 15 mark, and with only 3 of us. Amazing and such wonderful information. Thank you guys so much. Where can people find your podcast and learn more about you? Eric?
Yeah, go to beyondthetodolist.com. That's where you can find me. And then my links to social are there as well. My favorite is probably Threads right now, and LinkedIn.
Excellent. And Jurgen, where can people learn more about you?
So the easiest place to find my podcast is at the website innovabiz.com.au. So the podcast is there, and also all my social media links are there. I tend to be most active on LinkedIn. So if you want to start that conversation with me, LinkedIn is probably the place you'll get the quickest reaction.
And if you go to thedebmethod.com/blog, you will get the recaps and the way I do show notes and the links, but not only to your websites, but I do like to include the LinkedIn links as well. So I am at The Deb Method everywhere. I'm live every Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, or you can subscribe to Goal Chat on your favorite podcast platform. Really good conversation, and I know we could do at least another hour. I will have to have you both back. Good guess. See what happens. What final thought would you like to leave people with? You're good? Are you there?
I think you muted.
Yeah. Jürgen, you are muted. It looks like you're having an issue with your mic. Want to try again? We had such a nice non-technical difficulty app. This also happens. We'll see if he comes back. In the meantime, oh, and I forgot to mention, if you need more help with your goals, you can grab a copy of your goal guide and or 52 secrets for goal setting and goal getting. And we got you back. Did I vamp enough? I might have.
Sorry, all the audio disappeared, and then it said I'm not connected to audio anymore. So,
what is your final thought, Jürgen?
Final thought. Yeah, if you're interested in podcasting, give it a go and focus on what value can I add to the audience I'm going to get in front.
Got to focus on value. Absolutely. And Eric?
I would say if somebody's already listened this far in, what's one more episode with Deb and I over on my show all about her latest book, 52 Secrets for Goal Getting or Goal Setting and Goal Getting. So you can find that over at beyondthetodolist.com.
And I will put it in the recap as well. We had fun.
It was a great show.
Yes, I always like, I loved, as I say, as much as I love to write and I love to write, I like talking even more. And we are so fortunate because we live in this technological age where it's easy. Anyone can podcast, anyone can guest. So if you've been thinking about podcasting long enough and you've been listening long enough, take this as a sign that you are meant to get your voice out there. Thank you again, Eric Fisher and Jürgen Strauss, for joining me. Thank you for tuning in to Goal Chat Live. Go podcast. You know you want to, and we know you can do it.
Thanks.